Have a great meeting, everybody. I'm here if you need me.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Michelle. I think we have one more minute to go before 6.
Here's to 6.
All right, it's 6 o'clock on September 8th, 2021. And I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Conejo Open Space Conservation Agency. Do we have a flag salute?
Yeah.
Please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we have the roll call, please?
Director Bill De La Pena, absent. Director Huffer,
Yes.
Director Jones,
Here.
Vice Chair Nichols,
Yes.
and Chair Skay.
Here, thank you. I don't believe we have any presentations or announcements today. Is that correct, Mr. Stark? All right.
Yeah, we do not.
Then we'll go right to the consent calendar, and that's the minutes of our May 12th meeting. Any motion to accept or changes?
I don't find any problems, so I'll move we accept it.
I just have one question, and maybe I've just lost track of time, but in the roll call for those minutes, they list me as vice chair, and I don't believe that's the case.
Yes, I'll be changing that to Vice Chair Nichols. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
In that case, I will second Director Jones's motion.
All right. If no other comments, roll call vote, please.
Director Huffer,
Yes.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nichols,
Yes.
Chair Skay.
Here, yes. And I did skip public comments, and I believe we have 2 members of the public who wish to speak. Is that correct, Mr. Mark Lichak?
It looks like neither of our public speakers are in the room.
Okay, we can come back to that if they do come in. So in that case, let us go to action items. And the first one is to authorize implementation of the Arroyo Conejo Invasive Plant Management Project. Approve the CEQA notice of exemption and authorize a $100,000 match for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy grant.
I will be sharing my screen for a slideshow here. Oops. Here we are. Can everybody see my map?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna kind of leave this up here so you can soak it in while I tell you a little bit about the project. But first I'll orient you on the map. This is the project area. This is part of Arroyo Conejo, and the upstream extent is down there below at Hillcrest Drive. And it covers the area just downstream of the Rancho Conejo Playfields area. The purpose of the project here is to improve ecological conditions along Arroyo Conejo, and also to address some invasive species in the area that present local fire concerns. So the project is scoped to happen all on COSCA property. The 2 target species we have, I have illustrated on your right will be the arundo, that's also known as giant reed. And we have on the left the Mexican fan palm. The arundo displaces native streamside vegetation and degrades habitat for birds and wildlife. It may also contribute to localized flooding in some places, and it's a voracious consumer of water that can contribute to reduced stream flow. It also contains volatile compounds and develops large volumes of dry thatch, And these are quite flammable. And normally a healthy riparian corridor along the stream with native willows is fairly resistant to fires and can actually slow the spread of fires. Arundo has the effect of transferring fire through and among riparian areas. And this increases the damage to habitats during fires and also allows fires to spread. The fan palm, similarly, they will displace native plants, and they're also large consumers of water. The concern with these as well is that those dry fronds on the top are easily ignited by blowing embers during wind-driven storms. And these can dislodge and fly very long distances, carrying quite a lot of biomass with it. And so those are some threats to the local communities adjacent. This project area was chosen as part of an application to the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy for a grant that comes from the Wildfire Prevention Early Budget Action Plan adopted by the governor in April, I believe. And it was chosen because this was a listed priority project in the Conejo Canyons Management Plan, which the board approved in 2010. The project budget, well, we've set a project budget at $225,000, which we believe should get us through this section. This was sort of a logical breaking point when we got down below the ranch.
Excuse me, Brian, could you speak just a little louder? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sure, I might bring my thing a little bit closer. I push my computer away so my face doesn't get too big. Anyway, we proposed the project budget because we think it should be sufficient to get through this section. It's a logical breaking point down on the top of your screen where you see all the green dots up there. There really isn't any arundo in that particular area because there's no soil. It's all a bedrock area. The palms seem to do fine growing right out of rocks. So with the grant funds, we felt an additional 100,000 would get us through this section. The arundo and the fan palms have already been removed upstream of this area. These are two species that predominantly spread in the downstream direction. So we have some protected upstream so they're not washing through, and that work was done by the Ventura County Watershed Protection District. The project permits, we're seeking 2 permits for the project. One is from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. That's a stream bed alteration agreement. And we're also seeking a waterways permit from the Ventura County Watershed Protection District. Those are in process right now. The project does qualify as a project under CEQA, but it does also qualify for a categorical exemption. That's exemption number 33 for small restoration projects. These are generally projects that are under 5 acres in size and that don't involve disturbances of soil and things like that. The project does also address strategic goals and objectives, from the COSCA strategic plan involving environmental stewardship of natural resources, community fire safety. I think there was one more in there, but generally the project is a high priority and has been for a while. Now that we're in this position to be able to start practicing more stewardship projects on the land. This will be our first foray into a larger weed management project. What we're asking tonight for the board is to authorize implementation of the project, and that includes managing a competitive bid process because of the value of the project. This requires a competitive bid process. We'd also like authorization for the board secretary to sign project contracts with a cost not to exceed the project budget of $225,000. No new funds are needed as part of this project. As was described in the staff report, these are funds that are already in the COSCA trust fund and were received into the Woolsey Fire Recovery Fund. So that's where the budget appropriation is being requested. We'd like you to approve the CEQA notice of exemption, which was included in your board package, and to authorize the appropriation. With that, I'm happy to take any questions anybody has.
Are there questions of Mr. Stark? Yes, Mr. Heffer.
Yeah, Brian, other than a brief mention in the notice of exemption that the project was going to be done by, quote, hand crews, I don't see any mention in here as to who's actually going to be doing this project and how they're going to do it. And I probably should know this, but is this a small enough contract, whoever we're going to be contracting with, that the board does not need to authorize the contract itself?
I believe that the board can authorize the secretary to sign the contract, unless anybody knows otherwise. I'm not aware.
That can be allowed. The board can delegate that authority to the chair to enter into the agreement, or to Mr. Rogers or to Mr. Friedel to do so.
So as far as the methodologies, there's, I guess, 100 different ways to remove arundo. In a lot of places where there's large monocultural stands and you have reasonable access, it's quite common to go in with mechanical masticators and to go in and shred this stuff by the acre. The infestation up through Arroyo Canal is a more scattered infestation of scattered clumps. I mean, some of these are, up to a 1/4 acre in size or 1/3 of an acre, but those are the largest ones. We do have road access into the area, but it's really not sufficient to bring in heavy equipment. The heavy equipment also causes a lot more environmental disturbance in the area. So we'll be bidding the project with, and we've proposed for our permits to use hand crews to do this. And so they'll basically go in clump by clump, they lasso it into bunches and saw it off with a chainsaw. And then they can take it over to the adjacent road to load into a truck or a tractor for transport to a chipping station where the biomass is chipped and removed from the site. It's incredibly labor intensive. So yeah, it's a big project. We're hoping to get the biomass removal parts of it finished, through the winter months. We're doing this project outside of the bird nesting season to avoid conflicts with nesting birds, because in the arroyo down there is very rich bird habitat down there. So we're trying to avoid those impacts. And if we don't finish it in the first year, this is a multi-year project. We'll likely be down here doing retreatments for up to 4 years. The palms will basically be chainsawed down. They don't grow back. So what we do with the palms, they'll be cut up into smaller pieces, and dragged outside of the creek corridor, but they're left to desiccate for a month before we remove them off site, because of the cost of hauling by weight it's all water, so you leave them out in a place where they'll dry out, and then you can just pick them up and carry them into the truck. So that's kind of the strategy there.
Excuse me, does this type project have to be done very often? Have we done this in the past? If so, about how many years ago did we do it?
We've never really done anything of this scale on this species. There's been work like this done in our area by other agencies. The Watershed Protection District has been working in areas upstream of this, mostly in kind of where the streams and the arroyos kind of are inside of our urban areas. Most of those areas have already been treated. So we think of this as something that it's not really new ground in terms of our thinking. This is projects like this are happening all over the state and are high priorities for resource agencies. But this will be the the first of these types of projects. Now there's still a Arundo downstream. We don't know when we'll get to those. It's a vexing problem that's kind of, it gets worse as you go downstream, but this is an area where we, that is a unique habitat area. I mean, among all the open space in COSCA systems, there's really no place quite like Arroyo Conejo in terms of what it offers in the variety of habitats here. We think investing in its quality is a good first move for us.
Thank you, Brian. Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation. Well done. I certainly support the project. It's, long overdue, and I know it's one of those projects that will never end because you're continuing to have to do it. But you just can't wait and not let not get started and just kind of let it keep going. I have a couple follow-up questions. I know Arundo is very aggressive and it's very resilient and sprouts from its roots. So when you go in and mechanically, cut it or uproot it as best as you can, what type of success rate do you have with that, with minimizing the reproduction of it, as opposed to coming in with some chemicals to try and kill it, which obviously you're in a stream bed, it makes it very difficult to do anything like that. So what have the results been for this type of just mechanical removal and repetitive efforts for that?
Well, for a project to really be successful, it is a combination of biomass removal and some treatment with herbicide. By removing the biomass in advance, like all the big canes, it means you're just, you can, depending on the size, you can just daub a little bit right on the cane. Mm-hmm. So you're not really doing a broadcast. In some of these areas, the large clumps are allowed to regrow a little bit just to create, some foliar mass that you could do a dilute foliar application on. There are herbicides that are approved for use in aquatic areas. Mm-hmm. The project's designed to use as little as humanly possible to do this.
Okay. Yeah, I watched firsthand as they were doing that through the Glendale Narrows of the LA River, but that was very easily accessed by vehicles and they had some pretty heavy duty equipment. This is obviously very narrow and will take all the hand access you can. So I understand the process and the maintenance, and again, the disposal, you said you're going to let the palms dry out before you remove those, but the Arundo, you're going to take these to staging areas and then what, to the landfill? Is that the idea?
I'm going to send them over to Matt. Some of this may be able to be distributed in other areas. It won't be viable once it's crushed and desiccated. So we may be able to use some of that at open space areas as mulch, but other than that, we'll be finding safe disposal of it. In a lot of projects, for removing large amounts of this, they just grind it in place and leave it. Mm-hmm. But since the project we're doing also has a component for community fire safety, that we felt it was more appropriate to remove the fuel itself from the system.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm anxious to hear the results and how that progresses, because I think it's certainly a worthwhile project. So thank you. And I know it's a tough area to get to, but it is a great habitat. Look forward to restoring that.
Yes, thank you very much. And yes, I'm sure you're anticipating having to go back in the spring and recut. I mean, it will be a long-term project, but hopefully there'll be additional funding available to provide for ongoing maintenance of those Arundo clumps.
Yes, I think the budget will get
really a pain.
It really is. I mean, you're going back, but every time you go back, the amount of work kind of declines logarithmically as you go.
Right.
So there's strategies here that if you're methodical and timely, that you can get away with a lot fewer retreatments.
Very good. And were you anticipating, as far as labor, using obviously probably some of our own staff, but the CCC or a private contractor, or do you know yet?
We don't know yet, but because of the value of the contract, we anticipate I believe our procurement policies direct us to a competitive bid process. There are plenty of companies out here that do this very well, and a lot of these areas that they're treating are not really by the creeks. They can go in and use the mechanical stuff, but usually by the time you're getting up close to that waterway, they're doing that by hand in most places anyway. So their crews are experienced. The arroyo is very narrow and deep, and so I think just the geography of it keeps the infestations from being quite as massive as they would be otherwise.
Right. It's a very good project. Just Director Nichols.
Yeah, just one follow-up question. Thank you, Madam Chair. With the approval of this amount of money, will this be all directed to the contractor, or are there some direct costs that would be applicable to the to COSCA or staff or some other purposes, or is it just, they said, all to the contractor?
I think it's mostly to the contractor, as well as, we have permit fees and, monies that are flowing to agencies. The size of this and scope of this project is beyond what we can accomplish with our own staff, and our staff have important priorities, throughout the open space system. So we didn't anticipate deciding to draw from, our limited field capacity as it is to direct to this project. So there will be some project management and oversight, that will probably mostly be Anna as our resource specialist. I think she's well qualified to supervise the project.
Very good. Thank you.
If there are no other comments or questions, does anyone?
I'll move
wish
the
to-
recommended action, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Jones, does that also include delegating approval of the contract to staff?
Yes.
I don't believe, though, that there is a contract yet. They haven't gone out to bid. So at some point, they're going to have to come back to have you approve.
Oh dear, really?
Well, that's why ideally we would have, some oversight delegated, because the project would ideally start before our next board meeting.
So I'll move the two items mentioned in the recommendation.
Okay,
I'll second that.
we have a second. And to clarify, does that include if it meets the attorney's?
Well, the recommendation doesn't ask to delegate authority to, I'm not sure who we wanted to delegate authority to the.
On past contracts of this type where we've needed to consummate a contract before the next board meeting, those have been delegated to Jim Friedel as board secretary.
So someone would have to add that to their motion.
Mr. Jones, would you like to add that to your motion?
Would that be a good idea, do you think?
Are you asking me, Dr.
I'm
Jones?
asking Rory, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Jones, I think it would be to
Okay.
expedite the project. I think we need to have.
All right, I'll include that in my motion then.
All right.
You can always trust Felicia, right?
Yes. All right. And I'm sorry, did we have a second?
Yes, second.
Oh, a second by Mr. Nichols. Thank you. All right. If no other comments, please, may we have the roll call vote, please?
Director Huffer,
Yes.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nichols,
Yes.
Chair Skay.
Aye. Thank you. It will be a good project. We have information items now.
Do we want to cycle back to, do we have our public commenters available?
We do have one. Mr. Leck is here. I'll bring him into the room.
Thank you.
Okay, we will reopen public comments and welcome Mr. Chuck Leck.
I think it just takes a second for him to beam in.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Sorry we had apparently a late email that was finally received with the ability to click in. So I'll be within your 3 minutes, very sure. I am Chuck Leck. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks since 1978, and I currently serve as the Government Affairs Director for the Caneo-Simi Moore Park Association of Realtors. We represent 2,000 realtors in our area. We are urging all public agencies who manage and control public land and open space to have the higher or at least same obligation as private sector. And I know you honor the same obligation, and to be held individually and collectively accountable for public fire safety, loss of lives, loss of our open space resources, and loss of homes and property damage. Obviously, it's important. We're not looking to blame somebody, but we're looking to get somebody that could do something about it. Time is of the essence, and we are demanding creation of an action plan from all agencies to urgently implement the fire prevention and mitigation plan, possibly including such activities as regular vegetation and brush clearance and performance of regular control burns, of course, all based on fire department recommendations and oversight. Due to the devastating wildfires we experienced in the past 4 years, it seems obvious and imperative that we must make changes. Why are we in favor of increased wildfire mitigation techniques? Our citizens obviously value and enjoy living surrounded by mountains and open space. Management and preservation of open space should be our government's #1 priority, and I believe they've told us that. However, climate change and major fires in our service area have cost billions of dollars and affected thousands of lives. Throughout the state, fire insurance policies are in the process of being canceled, and homeowners will have to in the future rely on the much more expensive state fair plan. It's misnamed by being fair. These major fires previously occurred every 10 to 15 years, but climate change is shortening that timeline. There is currently a wave of massive, devastating fires across the state. For Southern California, our fire season hasn't even begun. That's usually October through December. If we keep doing what we have done in the past, wildfires will happen again, causing even greater colossal destruction of trees and vegetation, as well as loss of human lives and animal lives. Those who advocate for keeping open space in its natural, uncontrolled state without fire management witnessed how the Thompson fire scored 281,000 acres and destroyed at least 1,000 structures. The Woolsey fire scorched over 98,000 acres and destroyed at least 1,600 buildings. These two fires decimated over 31% of the entire acreage of Ventura County. These two fires destroyed all that our government was trying to preserve, in addition to a lot of homes. We urge you to take measures to allow these fires to be controlled more quickly by managing our open space in such a way as to both allow nature to take place while working with the fire department to mitigate the factors that cause these fires to grow so uncontrollably. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Leck. Are there any other public members who have signed in, Ms. Gore?
No, that's the only one.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let us go now to information items. We have the volunteer corps activity. Is that you, Mr. Stark?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my share screen here. We got volunteer. We received our program hours reports this month, and between May and August 2021, our Trail Watch volunteers filed 151 reports from out on the trails and logged 212 hours of hiking and watching on our trails. Our Adopt a Trail volunteers filed 59 reports and 176 hours out on the trails, and the Adopt a Trail is a little bit more hands-on. They may do some like weed clearing, garbage collection, and things like that. But all these volunteers they're a very valuable resource for us at COSCA. They're able to report back and be the eyes and ears for our ranger program. And it's really meant a lot to us. So we're grateful for our volunteers.
Very good. Any questions of Mr. Stark on the volunteer corps? Yes, Director Nichols.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Brian, Mr. Stark, on these reports that you receive, how many of these are maybe, I don't know, it's like a half a dozen people that are your regular reporters as opposed to periodic folks that just every now and then submit a report? I just was curious as to how your volunteers participate in that program.
Matt might be able to describe that more clearly than myself. Matt?
There's a core group that hike constantly, and then there's the people that hike once a week or once every other week. So it's kind of across the board. I don't have the number of volume of volunteers. We receive probably about 5. It seems like about 5 a day. So there's a variety of people out.
Very good. All right. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions. Let's go back to you, Mr. Kuba, for the ranger operations and maintenance activities.
Okie dokie. So summertime, of course, busy and hot. We've had a number of rescues. There was a search in the Hill Canyon area, below Rancho Canal Park, and down by the stream. The individual did not survive. He fell off of a rock outcropping. In between that time and this last weekend, the Rangers were involved in probably a dozen different levels of search and rescues, whether that was driving in just to bring water to somebody or dog rescues or such. But this Hill Canyon one and the next slide, the recent one from this last weekend, just emphasize, that you need to be careful out there. The individual that passed away in Lang Ranch, avid outdoors person, and it's hot. Make sure you've got water. Make sure that people know where you are. Make sure you've got your phone with you, and stay within your abilities. Next one. Rangers have cleaned up an abandoned homeless shelter or homeless camp. This is in the Los Padres area, I believe. Pretty extensive camp and a lot of stuff to haul out. Next. And once again, how did it get an open space? So here's this recliner overlooking Hill Canyon, overlooking Hill Canyon. And it was so heavy, the Rangers had to use a portable Sawzall to cut it up into pieces to get it off the hillside. I don't know how it gets there. Next. That's part one. So part two is these little guys. There was a phone call to the Rangers that there was donkeys out in Potrero Ridge area. Rangers went out with animal control, working together. Rangers were using bikes as they do in rescues and such. So they're covering a lot of mileage. And then one of the other neighbors had found it. And so when the Rangers and animal control pulled up to the cul-de-sac where the donkeys were, they were enjoying a bucket full of carrots and alfalfa. So they look a lot happier near humans, that's for sure. But that was a fun. Next. And this one's a video, Brian. I don't know if you can bring up the cursor. And maybe it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Didn't come into me yet. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So if you were able to see this video, when it's high fire danger, we don't use chainsaws. And I wanted to demonstrate this it's actually a short tree saw that the Rangers just recently bought. And it worked great for cutting. And our seasonal ranger, Joe, went through a 4-inch branch in just a minute or so. So, trying to be fire safe, trying to be productive and efficient, but also be, in shape. I guess you got to be. So next. This is the Los Robles reroute that we did earlier last year. It had some soil issues that it dried out and kind of started flaking away. So the Rangers went back in, towed in a bunch of rock and rebuilt a section of it next. And soil moisture is critical when building trail. The Rangers are using a backpack sprayer that actually comes from the Forest Service. And I used to use these when I did wildland fire. You just had about 3 or 4 gallons and you could spray down small fires and stuff, but it works great for the trails just to get some moisture in the soil so it compacts. Go ahead. Pretty much a constant. These are the bridges that we've been using the past few years, these blowout bridges. They work really well, but it doesn't take hardly anything for them to get blown out. And that's okay because they're easy to reset, and we had a little bit of a sprinkle and it actually kicked up enough water to move them. So, but they work great. Oh, I forgot to warn everybody about the spider picture. Okay.
Oh, cute tarantula.
Yeah, this is a male tarantula, and we're going to start seeing these running around, usually right around now, sunset-ish time, and they'll be out looking for females. The females are in their burrows, but the males will be running around, and that's all that's on their mind is finding a mate. So they're very safe. They're not going to bite you. They're big and scary looking, but they're very, very safe and nice guys. So don't disturb them. Let them be tarantulas and do their thing. And the last picture is not of our open space. This is White Sands National Park, and this is my daughter's last week interpreting there. So I put this up in honor of her last 4 seasons there at White Sands. So I'm available for questions if you need them.
Thank you. At White Sands, that takes me back. When my husband got drafted, that's where we were sent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. White Sands Missile Range. All right. Beautiful slides. Thank you. And our condolences to the families of the 2 folks that lost their lives. Very, very sorry about that. Yes, Director Nichols.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Kuba, I just was curious on how the Ranger recruitment process is coming along.
It's going. We had the supervising park ranger position out for about 2 months. We've done 2 interviews. We feel very good about the candidate pool, and we'll be seeing how things go in the next couple of weeks. But we do feel really, really good about it, and it's nice to have choices.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions of Matt? Thank you, Matt, very much. Mr. Rogers, did you have any city manager report for us?
Not tonight, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. In that case, board member comments.
My only comment is I think Chuck Huffer is getting to look more and more like Denny Gillette.
You're right. Goodness. Well, this is thank you very much, everyone, for being here tonight. Short meeting, but I'm glad we're getting the Arroyo Caneo project underway. That's great. Yeah. Oh, yes, Director Huffer.
I just have a quick non-open space question for Matt. Are you going to be out watching your son coach starting this weekend?
I am going to be watching my grandson play and my son coach. I've been giving him tips from back in my day of coaching. Anyway, so thank you for that shout out, Chuck.
Very good. All right, and good luck to all the little AYSOers too.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are no other board member comments, we can adjourn to our next regular meeting, which is December 10th. Have a good fall, everyone.
Bye, everybody.